Minister, there's been a lot of online chatter about the case between a Singaporean Indian family and PRC who went for mediation. Perhaps some comments on the outcome as well as your response to the online reaction.
Yeah. I think the first, I've got a number of takeaways on this. The first and most important takeaway that I have is that, it's heartening to see so many people come together, tens of thousands, to affirm a key aspect of the way Indians lead their lives in Singapore, a key aspect of Indian culture, cooking of curry, which I think is now very much part of Singaporean culture as well. And, people of all races, across cultures, come out and say, we support this. And because they are reacting to what they see as an attempted derogation from the way an Indian family lives in Singapore. So I think that's very good to be welcomed when people, it shows Singaporean identity evolving, developing, and people are prepared to come forward and support it. Okay? So that's my first takeaway. The second takeaway is that when I read what's some of the stuff that's online, I think at least some of the people, maybe not all, but some of them are reacting to a set of facts which are wholly inaccurate. And therefore, it's allowed emotions to run high in some places. The facts are inaccurate in a number of ways because the original report that appeared was unfortunately inaccurate. And I think sentiment here has been formed without a clear articulation of the mediation process and what actually happened in this case. If I could just touch on that. This particular settlement took place about, I think, 6 to 7 years ago. Now, we handle about 300 disputes between neighbours every year. Most of them are between Singaporean families across races and cultures. And I have to emphasize this is not the only cooking case we have had. We have had disputes between Singaporean families on cooking and other aspects which are specific to the culture of, the major races that we have in Singapore. I rather not go into details, but you can take it that all these aspects arise, or it's not uncommon for all these disputes to arise. So that's the first thing that people have to understand. The second thing is mediation as a process. In this case, the solution or recommendation was not made by the mediator. The way mediation works is that the parties, the neighbours in this case, are completely free to come for mediation. They are not forced to come, nor are they under any sort of compulsion to come. And throughout the process when the mediation takes place, either party or both can walk off, and that happens frequently. They don't like something, they can just walk off. There is no compulsion to stay on in the process, right up to the last minute. And the third thing is there was no agreement as such that was signed or settled at the mediation. What happened, as told to us by the mediator, is that this particular solution was discussed by the two families amongst themselves. The mediation center and the mediator provides a framework for the parties to talk in a non-confrontational way and try and solve their dispute. They arrived at the solution by themselves. You must assume that both had a good reason to arriving at the solution. And as I said, we have had cooking cases among Singaporeans, or I should say cooking disputes among Singaporeans, which were settled through the mediation process. But it's critical for Singaporeans to understand that mediation is a way for parties to come together and solve their disputes without any compulsion, in a totally consensual way. The alternatives being you go and see a lawyer, or you go and file a police report, or you do other things which take time and money, and often leave a bitter aftertaste. So here the two families shook hands on a solution they arrived at. Once they arrive at a solution, if the two of them are happy with it, then the rest of us, including the rest of society, should look at it as something that allowed the neighbours to continue living with a certain understanding of each other. But I think the sentiment that this is somehow unfair has arisen because people seem to have proceeded on the basis that the mediation is somehow legally imposed, either by the mediator or by law. But that is completely inaccurate. So I can understand people getting upset. So it's our duty to clarify those facts. And anyone who understands the mediation process will know, which is why I've decided that I should clarify this particular aspect and the facts of the case, and that this is by no means the only case, and it took place some time ago. The final point I would like to make is while we must affirm our Singaporean identity and must protect it, and it's good to see so many people coming forward to protect it, at the same time, let's not turn this into a xenophobic attack on foreigners in general. I made it a point to say we handle about 300 disputes between neighbours every year. The bulk of it are between Singaporeans. And we have had other cases where there were cultural disputes arising from differences in cultural practices. So these sorts of differences exist between Singaporeans, among foreigners, and between foreigners and Singaporeans. And not just in Singapore, but elsewhere as well. So let's take it in perspective. And also, let's take the whole issue in perspective. One dispute between neighbours 6 years ago or 7 years ago, which was resolved by themselves in the context of 300 other disputes every year. These are the ways neighbours resolve disputes.
On your last point, do you think the online reaction was a bit stronger because it was a case of PRs versus Singaporeans?
It's difficult for me to answer directly. Because I don't know exactly how some online sentiment is fueled. But I think a lot has got to do with the fact that people didn't know, and it's not their fault, because the original report does suggest these things. People believed that the solution was imposed, and the moment you believe that the solution is imposed, of course people will get unhappy. And second, I think there is not much of an understanding on, and again, if you're not a lawyer, you won't understand the mediation process. You would assume that it has somehow some compulsive element to it. The fact that it's totally consensual, and the fact that here the solution was arrived at by the parties themselves, I don't think these facts are well known. Ministry of Law clarified it. I'm not sure how many people read the clarification compared to the original article. And then, of course, you have one or two online sites for which facts are inconvenient, which would prefer to peddle half-truths and untruths.